Hello, everyone. I'm actually Derek Evers. I was going to go at 3:45. I'm not a 16-year-old spoken word artist, despite my youthish good looks. I'm a little bit overwhelmed to be up here, actually, as a guy who just sits behind a computer and talks about music most of the day. There's a lot of inspiring stories abound today, so I'll do my best. But as it says, my name is Derek Evers, and I'm the founder and publisher of the independent music and culture magazine, Impose. Through a lot of hard work, second jobs, and an amazing array of people who contribute to Impose both directly and indirectly, we've been fortunate enough to be in business for 10 years, the first 5 as a print and static website, and the last 5 as a daily updated website. Now, that's not a lot to take in, but there's a lot of words that I'm throwing around there, and the only one you need to really focus on is the word independent. Now, we've already had someone speak about being slightly independent. I'm not of the hipster definition of the word independent, but as anyone who's been in publishing at all, whether online or physical print, can tell you, staying in business for any amount of time, let alone for 10 years, without financial backing of any sort, advertising aside, is extremely difficult. Now, despite being around for 10 years, I'm sure there's a lot of you who probably have never heard of Impose, and I'm cool with that. That's fine. ImposeMagazine.com. Check it out. No, really, I am cool with that because success is a subjective term, and I feel it's that simple realization that is at the essence of being independent. My personal subjective view is that in order to achieve success, it must all begin with understanding the notion of having enough. Or to put it another way, not devaluing yourself or your product to get more. That is at the core of every respected business, no matter the size, whether it's, small, large, whatever. I think it's safe to say that there's very few people that start out thinking, oh, I want to be a money-hungry, blood-sucking vampire. And even if they do, they probably try to disguise it. Now, don't worry, this won't devolve into some altruistic monologue about not selling out. In fact, I haven't cared much about that discussion since I was attending a fine institution like this. But if I was to discuss that topic, I would quote one of my very first interviews that I did. When we started Impose, I did 3 interviews with 3 bands at the time. And one of them was with the Stern Brothers, who are the core members of the seminal California punk band Youth Brigade. And they would go on to form BYO Records. And I think they were celebrating their 20th year of existence at the time. And I asked them how important the idea of being independent, or more importantly, how important being anti-corporate was to them. Because I was I was in college. I was like, screw the man. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he replied basically saying, corporations, major labels, whatever you want to call it, they'll always exist. We're not here to fight them. We're here to live parallel with them so we don't need them. In case you're wondering, BYO Records still exists. I had to look that up because I wasn't sure, but they do still exist. Now think about that notion. Instead of thinking of always competing, always feeling like you have a sense of professional jealousy, if you felt satisfied with what you have, I would argue that it's the endless desire for more that can only create failure. How can you achieve success if you're never satisfied with what you have? Now you're probably sitting here thinking, man, this is loser talk. Or maybe I just wanted to say loser talk at a TED Talk. And if you're not thinking that, you're probably wondering how this all relates to publishing or music magazines. And I'll get to that answer in about, 10 minutes? I'll get to that answer. But first, I have to take you back in time, back to a time of musical wonderment. A time I would argue is one of, if not the best times of modern music history, when independent cultural and creative freedom was not only widely accepted, some of it even broke into the mainstream. That year was 2007. I could have gone a lot of ways there, but I had to go with the one that pertains to this story. Yes, 2007 was a glorious year to be in a creative field. Besides the obvious benefits of having a magical portal that could allow your creations to reach any corner of the universe, a worldwide interweb of sorts, it created the ultimate free market, a truly level playing field for anyone with an idea and $50 a month for an internet connection. Of course, established media and music companies didn't find this time quite as enlightening. But from a creative standpoint, it was about as close to a modern renaissance as we might experience. Knowledge was not only at our fingertips, but the ability to share ideas created a counterculture that never really had to carry the burden of being counter. Now, I realize a lot of what I'm referencing started way before 2007. I mean, the internet's been around since Al Gore invented it. But this moment in time, this time I'm speaking about, was like a nexus point, a crossroad of free market and free thought, where DIY was less a mantra and more about the realization that in this modern world, every individual is their own company. Every person's name is a brand. Now, I'll use Brooklyn as the obvious example, but the new venues and galleries that have come to personify the borough were not always so plentiful. Of course, venues were only in demand because bands were there, and then labels and blogs and websites, and yes, even magazine printing companies and record manufacturers, people that are still making physical product, even though most of what we deal with is on the digital level. A whole independent business community spawned from one thing: free thought. To borrow a very tired cliche, where there's a will, there's a way. Actually, let's go with, if you build it, they will come. It was also around this time that the economy collapsed. I use air quotes because I didn't own any property or stocks, so my only recollection of the failing economy was through being forced to change bank accounts because apparently my bank was funding drug cartels, apparently. Which, I mean, if you have to tell people that's why you're changing bank accounts, I guess that's kind of a cool idea. It was also that I saw this economy collapse was through the chicken little cries of a print and music industry that was dying. Print media is dying. The music industry is dying. I just want to see how much emphasis I could give that. Publishing behemoths were shutting faster than you can read them, and soon the big four major labels would become the big three. If you didn't know better, you would think death was abound. And it was to some degree, but this death was enlightening. I mean, any music historian can tell you that the story has been repeated numerous times in the last 100 years alone. When phonographs were invented, it was supposed to signal the end of the live music business. And with each new format, it signaled the death of its predecessor. Vinyl to tape, tape to compact disc, etc., etc. But this change was different. Now we are free of format altogether, no longer held back by the constraints of page counts and album lengths. The music world could turn its attention to wherever and from whomever good music was coming from. This took us to exciting and decadent places, like Baltimore. And all of a sudden, it didn't matter what the faces looked like that were making the music. The ability to appreciate music that's not reached you because someone spent $10 marketing a $1 CD to you had an amazing impact on an artistic community who would have never been able to thrive in a system that really only cared about promoting people who looked good, like Baltimore. So yeah, it was an amazing time to be poor and ugly. Well, sure, but it was also just an overall amazing time of creative enlightenment. But as do all great independent movements, whether it's the punk of the 70s and 80s, indie of the early 90s, or this most recent one, not only would it come to an end, but it would create the counter to the counterculture. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And when one generation is filled with ugly, dirty people who record music in their basements and bedrooms, the reaction usually is a generation of people who want to look amazing, listen to glossy dance music, and imbibe in drugs that are a bit stronger than the weed those guitar slingers are smoking. And if you look back through history, again, the punk of the 70s and 80s were followed by disco and 80s dance, the 90s by drum and bass and whatever Limp Bizkit was, and now today, we are again in a DJ culture. Now, none of this is good or bad. What it is, like most things, fashion and music related, is cyclical. Those are the same media behemoths whose sky was falling back in 2007 have it all figured out now. But they don't seem any the wiser to the fact that their actions previously are what created that counterculture. To paraphrase an article by Bill Simmons, he's a sports writer, he wrote for Grantland regarding steroids in sports. He said, "We like to look back in time and ask ourselves, how could we have been so stupid? So blind as to not see rampant steroid use. But here we are a decade later telling ourselves that Adrian Peterson came back a year sooner from a horrible knee constructive surgery because he's a freak of nature. Or that Peyton Manning went to Germany for treatment because they have better treatment there. Or that no all-star caliber NBA player has ever been suspended for steroids because they're totally clean. No, we'd like to think we've learned, and yet here again we stand in 2013, a passive voice yet again. Independence is not seen as a strength. Strength is in numbers, and numbers means popular, mainstream, whatever. Sure, those musicians who were making a couple $100s 5 years ago are now headlining huge venues, and that is totally deserved. We're not here to argue that. But the smaller infrastructure that created these success stories is finding it harder to sustain itself. And even the leaders of these independent communities are coming around to the notion of big enterprise. I would quote, there is an independent promoter in Brooklyn by the name of Todd P., and he was recently quoted in an interview with Gothamist that's saying he is no longer interested in being involved in anything that's even quasi-illegal. He wants to go beyond it. There are limitations to what one can accomplish in this DIY, underground, secretive thing. So the warehouse venues that popped up are now legitimizing or fighting amongst themselves for the shrinking pool of talent. While no one seems to mind paying Ticketmaster's ridiculous fees anymore or shelling out hundreds of dollars to see bands at a festival they could see for $10 at the venue down the road. The countless supply of music blogs and resources that existed have been replaced by SoundClouds and Bandcamps, and even those outlets that did champion an alternative voice, like Pitchfork or Vice, have in turn become the mainstream. Oh, so now the independent companies, the small one-man brands, we're the Chicken Littles, right? Of course we are. But that's what's so exciting about it all, is that because the industry is not suited to fit our needs, we've got to break it all over again, and thus the cycle continues. See, I'm almost ready to make a point. Has it been 10 minutes? No? In these few short moments, I've taken us from extreme highs and lows within an industry that is built solely on opinions and tastes. Think about that. No facts or figures can predict what will succeed. It is a purely opinion-driven economy. I can't say what you're going to like, or the fact that all of you might like it at the same time. It just goes to show you that you can't put too much vested interest in the ebb and flow of tastes. But, and here's that point I was getting to, you must put all of your interest into your own creation. And that advice works on every level, from the smallest to the largest. And yet it seems so obvious, but there will always be so much noise going on around you. Each trend opens another opportunity to steer in a different direction. And independence and success is not so much about staying the course, but it's actually about another George W. Bush quote. It's about remaining vigilant. In the case of music publications, it's about creating the best content you can. If it's a band, the best music. A writer, the best articles and concepts. And yes, there are financial implications involved in everything, but that will always be part of the uncertainty. Only the entrepreneurially, I practiced really hard to say that, the entrepreneurially minded welcome that uncertainty, because it's the uncertainty that drives you. And it's that uncertainty that will make you want to drop what you're doing and do something that won't make you so stressed out about paying the rent. But once you've gotten past that fear, you will realize being independent doesn't come from a false sense of entitlement because you've done it without anyone else. It's actually the complete opposite. You need a lot of help from a lot of people. And being independent means working really hard. And most importantly, it means being proud of that one simple fact. And that's where my concept of success comes back in. Success is independence. It's not about money, it's about freedom. Independence is its own reward. And if you can be happy while doing what you love, you figured out a part of life that few people have. See, this is really a 10-minute monologue of me telling you to do your best, even if it means trying just hard enough. Thank you.